Greetings and welcome to Lesson 7, the practical exercise for INTL 644. A practical exercise will allow you to exercise all of the course objectives at one time. The purpose of an exercise is to allow you to integrate everything you've learned so far and to employ your own experience and your own skills to develop an intelligence concept plan of how you would address a target, hypothetical target, of course. And so this week, a practical exercise is instead of yet one more paper. I think it's important for students to be able to step outside of the academic realm and to be able to take a look at how to apply things from a practical perspective. When formulating your plan, consider that your audience will be a high-level audience, they will be intelligence savvy, and they will be cyber savvy. There are no school solutions to the problem, although this is an exercise that I have worked with cybersecurity professionals before. Most of the students I've had the pleasure to work with at AMU since 2009 have been serving or former military, but not all. Consequently, I thought it was useful to provide kind of a mini course on tactics. For those of you who took INTL 442, Tactical Intelligence, this will be a review. Also, I've made the decision to use the Marine documentation rather than the documentation of any other service. I feel that the Marine documentation is the most to the point. I think it's the easiest to understand, and I think it provides direct guidance for what you'll need to understand from an operational perspective in order to attack the practical exercise. There are two Marine Corps manuals in particular that I am using. One is on tactics, the other is on intelligence. The tactical manual is the operations manual, and I have 4 chapters I think are particularly important. If you have the time, and I know time is a luxury for many of us, if you have the time, you might want to skim read the rest of it. If you have no operational expertise, I would highly recommend that you read the entire manual. The second manual, the intelligence manual, there are 2 chapters that I've indicated are particularly important, and I would recommend you read both of them. Here again, if you do not have any experience in military operations or military intelligence, I would highly recommend that you become familiar with at least the key parts of that manual. I've learned that different students learn in different ways. Some students are visual learners, some students are auditory learners, and some students are tactile learners. However, I think all students learn better from something concrete. And so I have a tactical example that I think is a really good prelude to the practical exercise. This is a classic small unit tactics piece. It's a fictional scenario set during the Boer War. And of course it employs British spelling because the British were fighting the Boers. The protagonist is Lieutenant Backsight Forethought, and he is in command of a small, well, I guess you'd say good-sized platoon, 50-man platoon holding a fort on a key river. The lieutenant is a lieutenant, which by definition means he's generally not very experienced. And he has a series of dreams that help him understand how to reinforce his defensive position. And he basically learns from these dreams, and he improves his sight with each one. We're going to apply these lessons to our exercise, and what I have done is I have taken the learning points, the lessons learned from each of the dreams, and I'm going to give you a commentary on updating them in the cyber domain. The first dream, do not put off defense, can be interpreted that every organization needs to have an active cyber defense immediately. The cyber defense should be layered, much like the old medieval castle where they had a moat and they had a drawbridge and they had guys with burning oil. And so the layered defense in the cyber sense includes things like firewalls, intrusion prevention systems, multi-factor authentication, and data leak protection. In the context of locals can be taken to mean in our world contractors, visitors, temporary employees, maybe even customers. Anyone who is not an employee but who has access to the physical premises or the cyber infrastructure. The bottom line on that is that anyone who has access has to be put through a certain amount of security vetting and processes. Thirdly, in the first dream, tents can be devices, networks, or servers, and the implication is that there has to be a minimum amount of security on any device to avoid, to preclude the casual attacker or the casual viewer. You can think about this as when you put your ATM pin in, you don't want anybody else learning what that is. And when you're at your favorite Starbucks, you want to make sure that nobody is reading over your shoulder for your important Facebook posts. The second dream makes a strong case for cyber concealment and deception. Two of the key techniques in this world are honeypots and sandboxes. Both of those techniques are designed so that an attacker attacks outside the main or production system. And no matter what attacks take place, they don't affect anything. Also, by having these false targets, the analyst is able to learn about the TTP of the adversary and watch them in action. As to the locals in this dream, today's employment world is marked by a lack of loyalty to the employer by most employees. And so some employers prefer to have contractors, and employees may covet the contractor role because they seem to get a better deal. You need to make sure that the security is constant regardless of whether we have contractor or employee, and if at all possible, make sure that there is parity between the two to reduce the temptation. The third dream actually makes a case for local management, and we could do a little bit of a stretch and say that this is guarding against social media and the OPSEC. So we have the social media is a way for the enemy to learn about the friendly force, and OPSEC considerations that we've discussed in the course need to be considered. The trenches, I think, make an argument for a progressive security architecture that has reinforcing security measures, and that also bears in mind that information needs to be protected by its sensitivity, not its location. Consequently, highly sensitive information that goes onto a smartphone, the smartphone needs to be protected with encryption, multi-factor authentication, and any other technological means that comes to mind. There's also an implication here that security is to be designed at the core, at the beginning of the design of the defensive feature or the network, so that it will be effective. Security that is bolted on the top or added at the last minute tends to be less effective than security that is found designed from the bottom up. The fourth dream, sorry for skipping over that slide, the fourth dream correctly realizes that cyber is everywhere and alludes to the Internet of Things and SCADA. Internet of Things means the connecting of devices that were not connected to the Internet before. The connected automobile, the connected thermostat, and SCADA, supervisory control and data acquisition, means devices that are measuring or altering processes. Now, the SCADA systems are particularly important in our scenario because the scenario is a manufacturing plant that is involved in process manufacturing, which means that the ingredients are probably stored in repositories that are connected to the internet. It also means that some of the processes may be controlled over the internet, and these two elements are very important in determining whether or not the plant in question, the hypothetical target, is a legitimate manufacturer of animal food supplements or is a terrorist manufacturer of biological or chemical weapons. Huddling them in could be a don't put all your important data in one spot and could be seen as an argument for the cloud and perhaps a reason why web services such as Amazon Web Services are so successful in today's marketplace. The fifth dream makes a cause for deception. And in the lesson materials, I've given you an article by noted security expert and pundit Bruce Schneer. Bruce is a very productive security analyst type who's also a vendor, and he writes a lot and he speaks a lot. So he did a particularly good blog on deception. The sixth dream is the final dream and allows everything to be put together and hopefully has provided the lieutenant with the optimal amount of information he needs in order to have his defense be successful against the enemy and holding his key river position. We have two forum questions this week. The first one relates to deception. Please provide 2 examples of deception in the cyber domain. And the second one is, do you feel that the lieutenant's dreams are a form of simulation? And what characteristics of simulations do the dreams have that lead you to that opinion? We'll next turn to the practical exercise. Before we start the exercise, it's appropriate to consider two questions. One, can you apply tactical intelligence TTP to cyber targets? And two, can you use non-cyber type analysis against a hybrid target? That is, a physical target relying on cyber to accomplish its mission. In this case, we have a plant that is highly reliant on cyber, in particular SCADA. So both of these questions would be answered in the affirmative. Let's move on to some of the facts that I'm giving you for your hypothetical target. Reports have been circling that the Damon chemical company, located in a port in Bulgaria, is a dual-use facility. Dual-use meaning it has a legitimate manufacturing purpose and a secondary purpose which is illegitimate and a concern. In this case, the main overt purpose is that they make additives for livestock. For livestock, in particular cattle. And the secondary concern is that it is manufacturing biological or chemical weapons. Your assignment is to develop a concept of operations as to how you would collect the intelligence to prove or disprove whether this is a dual-use plant. Here are a couple of more intelligence items. The plant has been the site of protests by both unions and animal rights advocates. Why is this significant? Well, I'll give you a little help here. Should you decide to perform any UMINT activity or social engineering, perhaps these two factoids would be helpful. A fourth fact is that tanker trucks have been observed leaving the plant between 0130 and 0330 local time. Of course, one of the things you would want to determine is this appropriate, or are they trying to hide something? Here is some imagery of different aspects of the plant, different shots. The shot on the left is the administrative headquarters, and the two other shots show the two angles or two different parts of the plant. Now, it could also be that these images are not totally relevant. That's for you to decide. So, here are the questions you need to answer. What traditional methods of intelligence would you employ, and what would be the priority intelligence requirements? The PAR form the basis for any intelligence collection. For a solid A grade, it would also be appropriate to include 2 or 3 essential elements of information that you would need to find out for each priority intelligence requirements. For those of you that took INTL 442, Tactical Intelligence, the midterm was a really good exercise in PAR and EEI. The second question is, how could you map the information technology infrastructure inside the plant? Maybe that's the reason I gave you the Wireshark site. Number 3 is, how could you determine the potential cyber vulnerabilities? We talked about that in previous lessons. Number 4, what ints, comment, SIGINT, MASINT, SOCMINT would you employ to accomplish the items 2 or 3 above? And what would be the PAR in general terms? Because this is going to a high-level audience, your plan should be no more than 5 pages, double-spaced, 12-point type. I hope that the practical exercise gives you the opportunity to put it all together, and that you now realize that there's no such thing as black and white in the cyber world, And you also realize that most targets in the 21st century are hybrid, meaning that they require traditional and cyber intelligence. The implication is that the intelligence cycle, or a modified version of the intelligence cycle, is a good tool to use in the planning and exploitation of these targets. And that you recognize that we have to integrate both the traditional domain analysis as well as the cyber. Please feel free to use whatever sources you'd like, whether inside or outside the course, and of course provide references. Next week is our final class, and we turn our attention to the future of the intelligence cycle and how it will be affected by technology. I hope that you will enjoy the practical exercise and that you will find it a refreshing change from yet one more paper. Thank you for your kind attention, and I'll talk to you again next week.